Good evening, traveler. Before we begin tonight's journey, make yourself comfortable. Close the door to the world outside, dim the lights, and let the quiet of this moment surround you. Let the day go. This is your time to relax. This is not just a story, it is a gentle path into sleep. A bedtime story woven from starlight, from the myths and mysteries that shaped the night sky. If you are ready, take a deep breath. Let your eyes grow heavy and let your heart slow to the rhythm of the cosmos above. Tonight's story is called The Messed Up Mythology of Every Astrology Sign. Boring history for sleep. Strange, tangled, and unforgettable. If you enjoy our bedtime history stories, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss the next one. If you are a first-time viewer, please support us by subscribing to our channel before you sleep off. All right, are you ready? Let's step into the stars together. The sky was not peaceful the night it happened. No, it was burning. 12 great shapes, beasts, heroes, maidens, twins, and monsters, suddenly quivered in the heavens as though they had grown restless in their glittering prison. Stars shifted like embers in a fire. Farmers who had once trusted those constellations to guide their crops awoke to see the heavens twisting. Sailors tossed in their ships, whispering that the signs were breaking apart. And in that moment, an ancient truth revealed itself. The stories behind the Zodiac were not calm bedtime fables, but brutal, tangled myths of betrayal, sacrifice, and strange bargains with the gods. The first to crack was the ram. At once, its golden fleece shimmered with the memory of a drowning child, a promise half kept, and a rescue that ended in sorrow. The cry of a sister lost at sea echoed across the firmament, though no mortal ear could quite place where it came from. Then the bull stirred. A shadow with horns rose out of the Black Sea, dragging a princess who clutched at the air for help that would never come. Her cries folded into the thunder of hooves, and the earth itself seemed to tremble under the beast's weight. The twins were next, their bond stretched so tight it was ready to snap. One mortal, one divine, each unwilling to let go of the other. Sailors swore they saw ghostly blue flames dancing at their masts, thinking the brothers themselves had climbed aboard. It was chaos, a storm of stories colliding, and as the constellations broke free from their quiet stillness, the night sky became a battlefield of myths long thought finished. And you, lying here, listening in the dark, might wonder, how did it come to this? Why do the stars carry such heavy stories when they could have been nothing more than silent lights above our heads? The answer waits, but not all at once. You must walk through the circle, sign by sign, and see how each story spiraled into confusion and heartbreak. Only then will you understand why the Zodiac became so hopelessly, wonderfully messed up. But first, let us step back. Let us return to the beginning, before the heavens split, before the signs quarreled among themselves. Let us begin where all circles must, at Aries, the golden ram who carried both salvation and doom upon his back. Yet, before I tell you that story, I must warn you, each chapter will bring you deeper into a labyrinth of gods, mortals, and creatures who refuse to be forgotten. And each story will end, not neatly, but with a fracture, a cliff's edge that will leave you dangling until the next piece of the puzzle unfolds. So take a breath. The night is long, and the journey is strange. When you are ready, close your eyes and picture the sky, not the one you know, calm and charted, but the one that quakes with memory and grief. For tonight, the stars are not guides. They are stories that bleed. And the very first of them is about to rise. The fleece gleamed brighter than any torch, its golden threads slicing through the dark waves like fire upon water. Upon its back clung two children, Phrixus and his sister Helle, their arms wrapped tightly around the ram's neck, knuckles white from the terror of slipping. Behind them, the land they had fled grew smaller and smaller, swallowed by mist and memory. But how did two children come to trust their lives to a creature born of gods and destined for sacrifice? It began in a kingdom ruled by a father too weak to protect them, and a stepmother whose envy burned hotter than the midsummer sun. She whispered venom into the ears of priests and courtiers, convincing them that the children must be offered to the gods, or else famine and ruin would sweep the land. Phrixus, quiet and obedient, and Helle, restless and proud, were led to the altar as lambs for slaughter. And then, lightning. A golden ram, shimmering with divine brilliance, descended from the heavens. The children were thrown across its back, and before the blades could fall, the ram carried them away, hooves striking the clouds, leaping across the very air itself. At first, it felt like salvation. Wind tore at their hair as they soared above valleys and seas, their hearts racing with the impossible. Phrixus dared to laugh, believing the gods had spared them. But Helle, she looked down. Beneath her stretched the endless Aegean, black as ink and restless as a beating heart. The sight made her dizzy. Her hands loosened. The ram surged forward, but the faster it flew, the more the sea below seemed to call her name. "Hold on!" Phrixus cried, his voice nearly lost in the wind. He reached for her, stretching until his shoulder nearly tore. But her fingers slipped, one by one, until only the tips brushed his. For a moment, hope lingered between them, a fragile thread, and then she fell. The splash echoed like thunder. The sea swallowed her in an instant. The place would forever after bear her name, Hellespont, the Sea of Helle. Phrixus screamed until his throat tore, but the ram did not turn back. It had its orders from the gods: save one child, not two. In its silent eyes, there was no mercy for mistakes. Hours later, trembling and half-mad from grief, Phrixus was delivered to the distant land of Colchis. The ram bent its neck as if in farewell, but what came next was no gift. For the ram, the very creature that had carried him to life, demanded its own end. The gods required sacrifice. Phrixus, still haunted by the sound of his sister's drowning, held the blade in his hand and hesitated. Yet in the end, he obeyed. The golden fleece was hung in a sacred grove, guarded by a serpent that never slept. A shining relic, yes, but one paid for with his sister's life, his own innocence, and the ram's blood. And so, Aries rose into the sky, not simply as a sign of spring or the promise of new beginnings, but as a scar across the heavens, a story of rescue undone by loss, a reminder that every blessing carries a cost. When travelers looked up and saw those stars, they did not see peace.
They saw a child screaming into the wind, a hand reaching too late, and a god's cold bargain. And the story does not end there. For another sign was waiting. Horns lowered, hooves pounding, carrying with it an even darker deception. The sea shimmered beneath a pale moon, as the ram stars dimmed, and from the horizon rose the next figure, a bull, enormous and unstoppable. Its hide gleamed white as polished marble, and its eyes burned with a hunger no farmer's field could satisfy. On the shores of Phoenicia, a young princess named Europa gathered flowers with her maidens. The meadow near the sea was alive with blossoms, saffron and violets, roses spilling their fragrance into the air. Europa's laughter carried like music on the wind. She was free here, away from the court, away from the duties that pressed on her shoulders. And then the bull appeared. At first, she felt no fear. The creature was dazzling, not wild, not threatening. Its hide seemed to glow, its breath warm but not foul. When it lowered its head, she reached out her hand, brushing her fingers along its smooth horn. The maidens giggled, daring her to climb upon its back. She did. The moment her weight settled on him, the bull surged forward. Europa gasped, clutching the creature's neck, thinking it was play. But the laughter of her companions fell away, replaced by shrieks of terror. Hooves struck sand, then foam, and then, horror of horrors, the bull plunged into the sea. Waves crashed, salt spray blinded her eyes, and still the beast swam with a strength that defied nature. Europa screamed for her father, for her brothers, for the gods themselves, but the ocean swallowed her cries. The land she knew blurred into nothingness. This was no ordinary bull. This was Zeus himself, king of the gods, cloaked in a form both magnificent and monstrous. His desire for her had burned too fiercely to resist. He had chosen not to woo, not to wait, but to take. Europa's terror gave way to despair. She clung to his back as dolphins scattered and sea nymphs watched silently from the waves. Every mile carried her farther from safety, farther from everything she had known. But the story did not end in despair alone. On the far shores of Crete, Europa was set down gently on the sand. Zeus shed his disguise, standing tall, terrible, and radiant. He promised her gifts, power, children who would one day rule great kingdoms. He crowned her with stars, as if her suffering was worthy of reward. And yet, what comfort is a crown to a girl stolen from her home? What balm is the promise of kings when your freedom has been stripped away? The bull rose into the night sky as a reminder of this abduction. Farmers saw it as a sign of strength, of fertility, of the seasons turning. But beneath the symbol, hidden like blood beneath clean linen, was a darker truth. The sign of Taurus was born from violation, from a god's hunger, from a princess who never chose her fate. Europa's story hung in the constellations, dazzling yet tragic. Her name was given to lands far away, her children remembered in dynasties, but her own laughter, the laughter of that meadow, was lost forever. And so the bull's stars glimmered not only with power, but with unease. Each spring when Taurus rose, the Greeks remembered that joy could be stolen in an instant, and that even the gods themselves were not bound by justice. But as the bull lowered its horns into the west, a new shape emerged. Two figures standing side by side, their shoulders nearly touching, their eyes searching for one another in the shadows of eternity. The twins had arrived. The sea was restless that night, though the sky looked calm.
Sailors hauled at ropes, muttered prayers to nameless gods, and watched with wide eyes as a strange cold fire crawled along the masts. It danced in flickering blue tongues, lighting the rigging but never burning it. "The twins are with us," the captain whispered. "Castor and Pollux." But who were these brothers, whose very presence could still storms and guide ships through walls of water? Their story begins in a royal hall where two children were born to the same mother but not the same father. Castor, son of a mortal king, was gifted with skill and strength, but his blood was human, his years numbered. Pollux, son of Zeus himself, carried divinity in his veins, immortal, untouchable, eternal. And yet, they loved each other fiercely, not as rivals, not as halves competing for wholeness, but as brothers bound by something deeper than fate. Together they rode horses that thundered across plains. Together they fought battles, fists and blades flashing in rhythm. Together they laughed, bled, and carved their names into the songs of poets. But every joy carried a shadow, Castor's mortality, the hourglass of his life already dripping, grain by grain. It was in battle that their bond was tested. The brothers fought side by side against enemies who came in droves, and for a time their rhythm was unbreakable. Castor with his reins, guiding horses as though born in the saddle. Pollux with his fists, every strike a hammer that broke bones and shields alike. But fate does not spare even the bravest. Castor fell. A spear struck deep, and though he staggered, he could not rise again. His blood darkened the soil, his breath rattled into silence. Pollux dropped his weapons and ran to him, clutching his brother's hand, shaking him as though sheer will could drag him back from the abyss. The gods looked down, unmoved. Mortals die, that is the law. But Pollux refused. He lifted his face to the heavens, tears streaked with dust and blood, and cried out to Zeus, "Father, if you love me, then do not let me live while my brother lies in darkness. Take my immortality, give it to him, let us share whatever fate awaits." For once Zeus hesitated. To strip away immortality was no small thing, but even a god could not ignore devotion so fierce. And so a compromise was struck. The brothers would share life and death, one day among the living, one day among the dead. They would trade places endlessly, never together, never fully apart. And so Castor and Pollux became the very image of loyalty, not bound by power, not by destiny, but by choice. Their stars were fixed in the sky, side by side, to remind mortals what true brotherhood meant. Sacrifice without hesitation, devotion without end. Sailors saw their twin lights and took heart, believing the brothers had climbed aboard to steady their ships. And in storms, when the blue fire flickered on their rigging, they whispered thanks. For they knew they were not alone. But the myth was not gentle. The gifts of the twins were bittersweet, for their love came with a cost, eternal separation, eternal longing. Each day one lived without the other, waiting for the cycle to turn. The constellation Gemini shines brightly, but within its glow lies an ache as old as time. For no bond, no matter how deep, escapes the hand of fate.
As their stars settled in the west, another figure stirred. Not noble, not mighty, not glorious, but small, almost pitiful. A creature with claws and shell, drawn into a fight it could never win. The battlefield shook with fury. A hero swung his club, its weight cracking bone, flattening earth, and sending sparks into the air. Before him towered a monster of nightmares, the Hydra, a serpent with many heads, each hissing, each dripping venom that could melt the flesh from a man's bones. But in the shadows, Hera watched. The goddess hated the hero, Heracles, son of Zeus, and she longed to see him fall. But none of her schemes had stopped him. Not madness, not exile, not the endless labor Zeus demanded of him. So she tried something else, something smaller. She summoned a crab. It was no mighty beast, no roaring lion or raging bull. It was a simple creature of the shore, claws clicking, shell fragile. Hera bent low and whispered, "Go, strike him, do not stop. Bite, claw, tear until your last breath." And the crab obeyed. It scuttled into the fray, claws raised like banners of war. Around it, the Hydra's heads whipped and thrashed, filling the air with poison, while Heracles swung and crushed, swung and crushed. The crab darted toward his heel, pinching hard, sinking its claws into flesh. Heracles staggered. For the briefest of moments, the great hero faltered, not because of the Hydra, but because of a crab, no larger than a child's helmet. Hera leaned forward, her eyes wide with hope. Could this tiny creature tip the balance? But then Heracles looked down. With a single strike of his foot, he crushed the crab into the mud. Its shell cracked, its legs twitched once, twice, then stilled. No one noticed, not the Hydra, not the gods above, not even Heracles himself. He turned back to the monster and continued his battle as though the crab had never lived at all. And yet Hera noticed. Though the creature had failed, though its sacrifice was pitiful and brief, she honored it. She placed its broken shell among the stars, fixing it forever in the sky. Not as a great hero, not as a mighty beast, but as Cancer, the crab. Its constellation shines faintly, almost shyly, between brighter stars. Sailors often miss it. Farmers forget its name. And perhaps that is fitting, for Cancer's story is not of triumph or glory. It is the story of devotion without recognition, of sacrifice without reward. What lesson does it leave us? That sometimes loyalty leads to nothing? That sometimes, no matter how fierce your courage, you are crushed and forgotten? Perhaps. Yet Hera, cruel as she was, ensured that even the smallest act of obedience would not vanish entirely. Cancer remains a ghostly scar across the heavens, a reminder that even failure has its place. So when you see its faint stars glimmering in the summer night, remember the crab that fought a battle it could not win, for a goddess who could not love it, against a hero who never even learned its name. And then, as the crab fades into shadow, another figure stirs, not fragile, not pitiful, but blazing with power, strength, and golden fire. Inside, the cave was rank with blood and bones. The lion's eyes gleamed in the shadows like twin torches. It lunged, claws flashing, jaws snapping shut with the sound of breaking bones. Heracles dropped his shattered club, dropped his broken sword. He had only his hands. The fight was brutal. The lion raked his flesh, tore at his arms, but Heracles did not let go. He seized the beast's throat, wrapping his arms around its neck. They struggled, crashing into stone, scattering skulls, shaking the very earth. Heracles' muscles strained until they burned, his vision blurred, and still the lion fought on, indestructible.
But even the immortal skin could not protect the creature from being strangled. Slowly, painfully, its roars weakened, its struggles slowed, until at last it collapsed with a final shuddering breath. Silence fell in the cave. Heracles stood, bloodied and gasping, his arms trembling from the strain. He looked upon the beast, and for the first time, victory tasted not like triumph, but like sorrow. For such a creature had been born of gods, and now it lay broken in the dust. Yet the lion was not forgotten. Heracles skinned it with its own claws, the only tool sharp enough to cut through its hide, and wore its pelt as armor. From that day forth, he walked the world draped in the lion's indestructible skin, a living reminder of the beast he had slain. And in the sky, the gods lifted the lion's image into the stars. There Leo blazes brightest of all, mane like fire, jaws forever open in a silent roar. To some, it is a symbol of courage, of impossible battles overcome. To others, it is a warning. Even the strongest can fall, even the wildest can be chained. But the lion's roar fades into silence. Another figure rises, softer, gentler, but no less haunting. A young maiden, her arms full of brain, her eyes downcast, her lips pressed in sorrow. The lion's roar faded into the night, and in its place came silence, heavy, suffocating, unnatural. From the fields below, farmers lifted their heads in confusion. Crops withered overnight, rivers shrank to trickles, and the once lush earth turned brittle beneath their feet. In the sky above, a maiden appeared. She held a stalk of wheat in her hand, golden yet fragile, glowing faintly against the dark. Her eyes were downcast, her expression of grief so deep it seemed to seep into the soil itself. This was Demeter's daughter, Persephone, the maiden torn between two worlds. Her story began in a meadow, where she laughed among her companions, plucking flowers and braiding them into her hair. The sun shone warmly, bees hummed lazily, and the earth yielded freely to her touch. She was the symbol of spring itself, of renewal, of endless abundance. But then the ground split open. From the chasm below, a chariot surged forth, black as midnight, driven by horses breathing smoke. At the reins stood Hades, lord of the underworld. His eyes locked onto Persephone, and in an instant she was seized, pulled down into the shadows. Her cries echoed across the world, but the earth swallowed her whole. Demeter, her mother, searched desperately. She lit torches, wandered through the night, calling her daughter's name. She begged gods, questioned mortals, and cursed the very heavens. But no answer came. Her sorrow grew into rage. If the gods would not return her child, then the earth itself would bear her grief. Fields went barren, fruit rotted on the vine, seeds lay dormant, refusing to stir. Hunger spread across the lands, and mortals cried out in despair. At last, Zeus intervened. He could not allow the world to wither entirely. He struck a bargain. Persephone would return to her mother, but only if she had not tasted the food of the underworld. But Hades was cunning. Before she left, he pressed into her hand a single pomegranate, its seeds crimson and glistening like drops of blood. Persephone, starving and exhausted, ate, but only 6 seeds.
And so the compromise was set. For 6 months of the year, Persephone would remain with her mother, and the world would flourish in spring and summer. For 6 months, she would return to the underworld, and the earth would mourn in autumn and winter. Thus the cycle of seasons was born, each year a reflection of a mother's grief and a daughter's captivity. In the stars, Persephone shines as Virgo, the maiden. She is not a warrior, not a beast, not a king, but a girl whose sorrow reshaped the world. To look upon her constellation is to remember the fragile balance between life and death, light and shadow, joy and despair. The wheat she holds is a promise and a warning. Life will return, but only after loss. The fields will bloom, but only because the earth has wept. Farmers pray to her before planting, sailors glance to her before voyages, lovers whisper her name when parting, for all know the truth she carries, that nothing lasts forever, and every return carries the memory of absence.
As her stars fade westward, another figure approaches. This one darker, heavier, coiled like a trap. A scorpion, its tail arched, venom glistening on its stinger. It does not mourn, it does not weep, it waits. The maiden stars dimmed, and from the east, a darker shape crawled across the sky. A scorpion, enormous, armored, its tail arched like a crescent moon, venom glistening at its tip. It moved slowly, deliberately, as though savoring each step toward its prey. That prey was Orion. Orion was no ordinary hunter. He strode across the earth with his bow always at his side, taller than any man, stronger than any beast. His arrows never missed, his hounds never tired, and his pride never softened. Mortals spoke of him as if he were more than human. Some even whispered that he was Zeus's equal, and Orion believed them. He boasted that no creature could escape him. He claimed that he would rid the world of all beasts, leaving none to challenge his skill. To him, the earth was his hunting ground, and every living thing, lion, stag, boar, even the smallest bird, was his quarry. But the gods do not tolerate arrogance. Some say it was Gaia, mother of the earth, who heard his vow to destroy her creatures and sent the scorpion to stop him. Others claim it was Artemis, goddess of the hunt, angered by his pride or jealous of his beauty. Still others whisper that it was Hera, ever eager to cut down those favored by Zeus. Whatever the truth, the scorpion came. It rose from the ground one night as Orion hunted, silent as shadow, patient as death itself. Orion drew his bow, confident as always, but his arrows clattered harmlessly off the beast's shell. He struck with his sword, but the scorpion's armor turned the blade aside. The fight stretched on, man against monster, hunter against hunted. Orion grew weary, sweat stinging his eyes, breath tearing from his lungs. Still the scorpion pressed forward, its claws snapping, its stinger poised. At last, with a movement swift as lightning, it struck. The stinger plunged deep into Orion's flesh. Venom spread through his veins like fire, faster than he could cry out. His knees buckled, his bow fell, and the great hunter collapsed upon the earth, eyes wide in disbelief. Orion, the mighty, the proud, the invincible, slain by a creature he would have laughed at hours before. The gods set both hunter and scorpion in the sky, but they placed them far apart, forever chasing, forever fleeing. When Orion rises in the east, Scorpio slips beneath the horizon. When Scorpio rises, Orion vanishes. They are never seen together, for the memory of their battle burns too brightly in the heavens. And so, Scorpio remains a reminder. Pride blinds, arrogance destroys, and even the greatest can be undone by the smallest. Its stars glimmer in the summer sky, curved like a blade, its tail always ready to strike again. Sailors fear it, farmers respect it, storytellers whisper it with unease. For Scorpio is not a story of loyalty or love. It is a story of inimitability, the certainty that death comes for all, whether by beast, by God, or by fate itself. But as Scorpio settles into shadow, the night trembles once more. Another shape appears, this one heavy with scales, arms outstretched, as if weighing the very souls of men. The scorpion shadow had barely faded when a new figure emerged in the sky. Not a beast this time, nor a hunter, but something colder, more unnerving. 2 trays hung from a beam, suspended in perfect poise, swaying gently as if touched by unseen hands. The scales. Libra. Where Scorpio was venom and violence, Libra was silence and weight. No claws, no fangs, no flashing blades, just balance. Yet this balance carried more dread than any predator's strike. For what the scales measured was not gold, not grain, not treasure. They measured truth. They measured souls. The ancients feared this constellation in a different way. Farmers looked to it when dividing their harvest, merchants when measuring goods, judges when speaking verdicts. They believed the scales in the heavens mirrored the scales of the earth. To cheat, to steal, to lie, it was not just dishonor, it was to tilt the scales themselves, and the stars remembered. But the scales were not always kind. There are whispers that they once belonged to Themis, the titaness of divine law, who held justice in her very hands. Some stories claim they were later carried by Astraea, the maiden justice, who fled earth in sorrow when men grew too corrupt to bear. Others say the scales were not given at all, but forged by the gods in secret, a device too dangerous to leave in mortal hands. Whoever bore them, one truth remained: the scales never lied, and when they tilted, kingdoms fell. There was once a king, it is said, who ruled with a heavy hand. His soldiers took what they pleased, his tax collectors bled the people dry, and his courts punished the poor while excusing the rich. He believed himself untouchable. He feasted beneath golden ceilings while his subjects starved outside his gates. But one night, the stars above him shifted. Libra rose higher than it ever had, its trays glowing brighter than torches. The priests panicked, for they knew what it meant. The gods had set the king upon the scales. At first, the balance wavered, trembling as though the heavens themselves debated. But slowly, steadily, one side sank lower, heavier, darker. The other tray rose light as air. The message was clear. The king's sins outweighed his worth. The next day, the earth itself seemed to rebel. His armies deserted, his servants fled, his people stormed the palace gates. By nightfall, the king was gone. No one knows where, for the records say only that he vanished beneath the shadow of the scales. And so the stars carried a warning. When Libra shines, beware, for the scales judge silently, without warning, without appeal. They tilt only once, and when they do, the weight of destiny cannot be undone. Travelers still glance upward when crossing borders. Merchants still check their measures. Rulers still grow uneasy when Libra burns bright above their courts. For justice may be patient, but it is never blind. The heavens do not forget. But just as the scales settle, another figure rises behind them, crawling with fury, stinger poised. The air grows hot,
Red light flickers, and the desert wind seems to whisper of vengeance. The scales had barely steadied when a rust-red glow returned on the horizon. The Scorpion was not finished. Its heart, the blazing star Antares, pulsed with vengeance. Though it had struck Orion down, the creature crawled back into the heavens, its stinger arching, ready to lash again. But waiting for it, bow drawn and arrow notched, stood another figure, a centaur. Half man, half horse, his body coiled with strength, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. This was Sagittarius, the archer, guardian of the southern sky. Unlike Orion, who hunted for pride, Sagittarius hunted with purpose. His arrows were not for trophies or sport, but for justice and for survival. Legends differ on who this archer truly was. Some say he was Crotus, a mortal raised among the Muses, gifted with skill in archery and the invention of applause. Others whisper he was Chiron, the wise centaur teacher of heroes. But all stories agree on one thing: his arrow never missed. And on that night, his aim was fixed on the heart of the Scorpion. The battle was silent, the kind of silence that presses on the chest as though the heavens themselves held their breath. The Scorpion's claws scraped the stars, sparks trailing like meteors. Its tail lashed, poison dripping like fire. Sagittarius stood firm, hooves planted, bow bent to its limit. Then came the twang. The arrow flew, bright, sharp, unerring. It cut across the heavens, slicing through centuries of fear, and struck Antares, the fiery heart of the Scorpion. The beast shuddered, stars scattering from its body like embers from a dying flame. For the first time, Scorpio faltered. But death was not granted so easily. The gods, wary of destroying their symbols, did not let the Scorpion fall entirely. Instead, they froze the battle in the sky. Sagittarius forever aims his arrow at Antares, the Scorpion's heart, holding it in check. Scorpio forever coils in defiance, tail raised, daring the archer to release. Neither wins, neither loses. The sky remembers both, the threat and the counterstrike. Travelers looked up at these constellations and saw not just stars, but warnings. Stay sharp, the elders would say. When danger rises, meet it with readiness. Keep your bow drawn, your aim steady, for the Scorpion strikes when least expected. Yet beneath this celestial duel lies a deeper truth. Sagittarius is not merely a killer of beasts. He represents the struggle to hold chaos at bay, to balance instinct with wisdom, violence with discipline. His arrow restrains destruction, but his presence also reminds us that danger never sleeps. It only waits.
But even as the archer holds his aim, another figure emerges in the heavens. A twisted form with the body of a goat and the tail of a fish, straddling two worlds, earth and sea, strength and mystery. It carries secrets older than kings and storms. From the clash of Scorpion and Archer, the heavens shifted once more. Out of the black waters of night rose a shape unlike any other. Part goat, part fish, a creature born of contradiction. Hooves struck the mountain peaks, while a scaled tail shimmered with the currents of the sea. This was Capricorn, the sea goat. Unlike the fierce lion or the proud hunter, Capricorn was not born from triumph. Its story is one of survival, of fleeing danger and adapting when all seemed lost. The ancients told of the day when Typhon, the monstrous giant with 100 snake heads, stormed the heavens. The gods themselves fled in terror. Some transformed into animals to escape his wrath. Zeus became a ram, Hera a cow, Aphrodite a fish, and Pan, the goat-legged god of wild places, leapt into the Nile. But panic betrayed him. In his haste, he leapt too far, plunging half his body beneath the waves. His upper half remained goat, horns curling, hooves strong, but his lower half twisted into the form of a fish. The gods laughed at first, for the shape was absurd. But when Typhon's shadow blotted the sun, the laughter turned to fear again. Pan, strange though he appeared, did not falter. He blew his pipes, raising a shrill note that disoriented the monster and bought Zeus time to strike. Without that moment, Olympus may have fallen. For this act, Zeus set his likeness among the stars, not as a figure of ridicule, but as one of cleverness, resourcefulness, and survival. Capricorn became the reminder that even in panic, even in error, one can still find a way to endure. Yet Capricorn carried another secret, one darker still. In Crete, long before the Olympian nods rose to power, there was a goat named Amalthea. She sheltered the infant Zeus when his father Cronus devoured his children. She fed him with her milk, hid him in a cave, and kept him alive while the world above trembled. But one day, the child Zeus played too roughly. In his small divine hands, he snapped one of her horns. Zeus, stricken with guilt, blessed the horn. It became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, which would never empty, spilling food and drink without end. Amalthea herself was set among the stars, her body immortalized as Capricorn. Thus, the sea-goat became not just a symbol of endurance, but of sacrifice. She gave her milk, her horn, and her very shape so that Zeus could grow strong enough to overthrow Cronus and rule the heavens. Capricorn, then, is not a triumphant constellation. It is one of humility, of loss, of strength, found through strangeness. Its stars rise in the coldest nights of winter, when the earth is barren and the days are shortest. To those who watch it, Capricorn whispers, survive, adapt, endure. But survival is never enough. Beyond the sea-goat stars, the sky trembles with motion. A vessel appears carried by a youthful figure pouring water endlessly into the heavens. The stream flows toward the southern fish, glistening like liquid silver. From the frosted silence of Capricorn stars, a stream begins to glimmer across the night. Droplets shimmer as though falling through endless space, spilling from the hands of a youthful figure. His face is unlined, his body ageless, his jar tilted forever downward. This is Aquarius, the water-bearer. To the eye, it seems simple, a boy pouring water into the heavens. Yet the ancients never agreed on what that water truly was. Some said it was rain for the thirsty earth. Others whispered it was the flood that once swept the world away. Still others claimed it was not water at all, but ambrosia, the drink of immortality, draining drop by drop into eternity. One story speaks of Ganymede, the most beautiful mortal ever born, a shepherd prince of Troy. His beauty caught the gaze of Zeus himself. One day, as Ganymede tended his flocks, an eagle swept down from the sky. Zeus in disguise.
With talons sharp, it lifted the boy into the heavens. The world below despaired, but Zeus, unwilling to hide his desire, placed Ganymede among the gods as cupbearer of Olympus. He served nectar at their feasts, his presence reminding them of beauty's fragile power. To soothe mortal grief, Zeus gave Ganymede's father a gift of immortal horses, swift enough to outpace the wind. But the boy remained in the sky, holding his jar, forever pouring. Yet another legend tells a darker story. They say Aquarius is not Ganymede at all, but a warning. The flood he pours is the memory of the great deluge that once drowned mankind. The jar is a curse, tipped eternally so that mortals never forget the god's wrath. Each star in the stream is a drowned soul, sparkling as it sinks into the abyss. Which story is true? None can say. Perhaps both are. Still, one truth binds them together. The jar is bottomless. What it carries never ends. An eternal stream, a symbol of time itself, spilling forward no matter who begs it to stop.
Sailors once feared Aquarius, for when his stars ruled the skies, the seas grew violent. Storms churned and rivers swelled beyond their banks. Farmers prayed for his mercy, for drought and flood both answered his hand. Kings, too, sought omens in his stream, wondering if it foretold plenty or ruin. But there was another, more secret belief. Some whispered that Aquarius poured not water, nor flood, nor nectar, but memory. That what he spilled were the forgotten stories of the world, washed away to make room for the new. And when the jar is finally empty, if it can ever be emptied, the heavens themselves would fall silent. His stars shine cold, pale, and restless. They do not roar like Leo or blaze like Scorpio. They drift like rain against a window, soft yet unyielding. For Aquarius is not passion, nor pride, nor vengeance. He is inevitability. What flows from him cannot be stopped. But even as his stream glistens, it flows into the waiting mouth of a final constellation. Not a man, not a beast, but a creature of the depths, vast and slippery, swallowing the waters without end. The heavens had grown heavy with water. Aquarius's endless stream poured downward, silver and shimmering, into the black of the celestial sea. And in that sea, something stirred. Two shapes flickered in the deep, darting swift and silent. Their scales caught the light of distant stars, flashing like coins on dark water. Two fish, bound together by a cord, circling endlessly. This was Pisces, the final sign. At first glance, the fish seemed gentle, harmless compared to lions, scorpions, and archers. Yet their story is among the strangest and the most enduring. For Pisces is not about conquest, nor vengeance, nor triumph. It is about escape. The story begins once more with Typhon, the monstrous enemy of the gods. His shadow had already sent Capricorn fleeing, already shattered Olympus with his storm. When he returned, the gods knew they could not fight. Not this time. Their weapons, their thunder, their spears, none could hold him back. So they did what mortals so often do in the face of destruction. They ran. But running was not enough. Typhon's 100 serpent heads scanned every corner of the earth. His fire scorched every cave. His wings beat down the forests. The gods, desperate, leapt into the Nile. To escape notice, they took new forms, animals that could hide in the chaos of the wild. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, became a fish.
Her son, Eros, followed her into the water, transforming alongside her. But the current was strong, and in the flood of panic, they risked being torn apart. So they tied themselves together with a rope, a cord that would not break. Side by side they swam, slipping past the terror that shook the skies. It was not bravery nor triumph, but survival. And it was enough. Zeus, in gratitude, set their shapes among the stars, not as conquerors, not as hunters, but as two fish bound forever. Their constellation is faint, hard to see, but perhaps that is fitting, for Pisces represents not the blaze of glory, but the quiet endurance of those who refuse to be broken. Yet the symbol runs deeper still. The cord that binds them became a reminder that in chaos, connection is survival. That to hold fast to another, even in fear, is an act of defiance against the void. In time, sailors came to honor Pisces, praying for safe passage across stormy seas. Lovers looked to them as a sign of unbreakable bonds. And mystics whispered that Pisces was the place where the cycle ends, where souls dissolve back into the ocean of stars before beginning again. For the zodiac is a wheel, not a line. Aries will rise again after Pisces, the ram bursting forward from the sea of quiet, and the cycle repeats. Birth, growth, struggle, triumph, fall, escape, renewal. But the ancients warned of something else. When Pisces shines brightest, when the fish leap high in the heavens, it means the cord is pulled taut, that what binds the world together may be tested, that perhaps one day the fish will be pulled apart. And what happens when the rope finally snaps? No legend tells. Perhaps that is the final secret the stars keep. Until then, the fish swim, forever circling, forever bound, closing the wheel of the zodiac. The hunter fallen, the scorpion stilled, the scales balanced, the waters poured, the fish bound together. And above it all, the stars whisper the same truth. The myths are never finished. They live as long as we look up and wonder.
And so the circle of the stars is complete. From the ram's first spark of fire to the quiet swim of the fish, every story has played its part in the great wheel of the sky. As you close your eyes tonight, let the constellations drift with you into dream. Let their battles, their escapes, their triumphs, and their secrets dissolve into the silence of sleep. The stars will still be there when you wake, and tomorrow night they will be waiting again, ready to tell another story. If you enjoyed this journey, return here whenever you need another story to guide you into rest. And please subscribe to our channel. Thank you for listening. Rest well, dream deep, and let the night carry you gently onward. Good night.